Imagine being confronted by the police during a quiet dinner for no apparent reason. What began as an ordinary night for Dr. Michael quickly transformed into an event that not only shook his life but also sparked a revolution. Discover how a simple meal exposed hidden truths and incited a battle for justice that resonated throughout an entire nation. Hello, my friends. I have a huge favor to ask of you. If you enjoy the videos on our channel, I kindly ask you to subscribe and help us reach the milestone of 1,000 subscribers this month. Subscribe and help us make this dream come true. Thank you, and let's get to the story. On a starry Friday night, Dr. Michael, a respected physician in the Atlanta community, decided to treat himself to dinner at the city's new luxury restaurant. Seated at his favorite table, overlooking the garden illuminated by twinkling lights, he savored every bite of his favorite dish, exquisite pasta with truffle sauce. The soft music complemented the atmosphere, making the dining experience even more enjoyable. Suddenly, the serenity of the moment was interrupted by the sound of hurried footsteps and voices in an authoritative tone. Dr. Michael, surprised, looked up to see two uniformed police officers approaching his table quickly. Not understanding the reason for such an approach, he tried to remain calm, but the inquisitive gaze of the officers was already attracting curious glances from other patrons. "Dr. Michael, we need to ask you some questions," announced one of the officers, his tone suggesting this was not going to be a simple conversation. The words "why me?" echoed in Michael's mind, but he kept them to himself, choosing to cooperate. "Of course, I can help with whatever is necessary," he replied, gently placing his fork down on the plate. The officers, ignoring the surrounding environment and Michael's dignity, began questioning him about his presence at the restaurant and his recent activities. The approach, clearly laden with racial prejudice, revealed not only the injustice of the situation but also the growing discomfort among spectators who whispered to each other, questioning the need for such interrogation in a place meant for celebration and relaxation. Dr. Michael, maintaining his composure, answered calmly, although each baseless question heightened his frustration and the feeling of being judged for something beyond his mere presence at the restaurant. "I've dined here several times, and I never imagined I would be questioned about my right to enjoy a meal," he said, his voice a mix of disappointment and defiance. This incident, a disturbing reflection of a reality many prefer to ignore, marked the beginning of a night that promised to be more than just a simple dinner. As Michael prepared to face what would come next, he couldn't shake the feeling of being an involuntary protagonist in a story that needed to be told. A story not just about him, but about all those who have ever felt wronged under the weight of judgmental stares and unfounded accusations. As Dr. Michael sought to remain calm in the face of unfounded accusations, the tension in the air became increasingly palpable. Other patrons, once absorbed in their conversations and dishes, now watched the scene unfold with a mix of surprise and discomfort. The luxury restaurant, a stage for celebrations and joyful gatherings, was slowly transforming into a theater of public embarrassment. The officers, indifferent to the discomfort they were causing, continued with their questions. Each inquiry seemed more steeped in prejudice than the last, addressing not only Michael's activities that night but also subtly insinuating about his integrity. "And how can a doctor like you frequent places like this so regularly?" one of the officers questioned with a slight sarcastic smile. At that moment, a new figure emerged at the entrance of the restaurant, moving with a clear purpose through the hall. It was David, Michael's brother and a well-known civil rights attorney in the city. Noticing the situation, his expression hardened. With firm steps, he approached the table and, his voice reflecting both control and indignation, interjected, "May I ask why you are interrogating my brother like this in public?" The officers, taken aback by the interruption, exchanged glances before responding. "We're just conducting some routine checks," one of them attempted to explain, clearly uncomfortable with the authority that David exuded. "Routine checks do not require such a spectacle," David retorted, glancing around at the other patrons, who were now witnessing the confrontation with heightened attention. David then turned to Michael, asking in a low voice if he was all right. Michael simply nodded, his expression a mix of relief and frustration. "We're not going to let this slide," David whispered, a plan already forming in his mind. David's words not only promised support and defense, but also ignited the first spark of a movement that would grow far beyond that embarrassing dinner. David's presence transformed the atmosphere. What began as an isolated approach was about to become a public issue, challenging the discriminatory practices that still persisted, often hidden but now exposed to the light of collective indignation. The night, far from ending in a simple meal, marked the beginning of a greater fight for justice and equality. David, taking on the role of his brother's defender, wasted no time in establishing the legality of the situation. With the authority of someone accustomed to dealing with injustices and abuses of power, he questioned the officers about the basis of their accusations, challenging them to justify the public embarrassment to which they had subjected Michael. The officers, realizing they were dealing with an experienced civil rights lawyer, began to retreat, their responses becoming evasive. "We received a complaint," one of the officers mumbled, avoiding David's direct gaze. "A complaint? Based on what? And why would that justify this approach in public?" David insisted, his voice rising enough for the other patrons to hear. The tension between David and the officers was palpable, each of David's words marked by a mix of indignation and control. He knew he was not just fighting for his brother, but for every individual who had ever been subjected to similar treatment without just cause. As the discussion continued, the other patrons of the restaurant, now fully attentive to the unfolding events, began to show their support. Murmurs of disapproval towards the officers grew, and some even started filming the incident, ensuring that the truth would not be confined within the restaurant's walls. Michael, watching his brother defend him with such passion and skill, felt a mix of gratitude and renewed hope. He knew that the incident that night would not be forgotten, and David's courage in confronting the unjust situation was a powerful reminder of the unwavering support they had as family. By the end of the confrontation, the officers, unable to sustain their initial approach, decided to leave the restaurant, mumbling weak apologies. David, ensuring his brother was all right, knew that this victory was just the beginning. They would not only clear Michael's name but also use the incident as a catalyst for greater change, fueling a movement that was already beginning to take shape in the hearts and minds of those who had witnessed the scene. As David and Michael left the restaurant, the indignation that had unfolded within its walls quickly spilled out onto the streets. The videos of the incident, captured by supportive patrons, spread across social media, garnering thousands of views within hours. The scene, now public and undeniable, generated a wave of shock and empathy among viewers throughout the city and, eventually, the country. In the hours that followed, the local community began to mobilize. Civil rights groups, activists, and ordinary citizens expressed their discontent and support for Michael. The images of the doctor being unjustly interrogated, alongside his attorney brother defending him with fervor, became a powerful symbol of the fight against racial discrimination and abuse of authority. Meetings were organized, and community forums buzzed with debates and planning for actions. "This isn't just about Dr. Michael," a community leader asserted in a packed meeting, "it's about all of us who feel the weight of this kind of injustice every day." The statement resonated, inspiring a collective feeling of the need for change. In response to the growing public pressure, the Atlanta city government found itself compelled to respond. The mayor announced an investigation into the actions of the involved officers, promising transparency and justice. It was a small step, but an indication that the voices united in protest were not being ignored. Meanwhile, David and Michael, at the center of this storm, were organizing their own response to the incident. They planned legal actions, not only seeking redress for what Michael had suffered, but also to instigate significant reforms in the way the law was applied in the city. With each share of the videos, each discussion in forums, and each new voice rising in solidarity, Michael and David's story ceased to be just an isolated incident. It transformed into a rallying cry for action, a demand for a future where such injustices would be not only rare but unacceptable. As the outrage grew, David and Michael realized that the situation called for more than just a legal response to the incident. It was an opportunity, perhaps a unique one, to catalyze significant change not only in Atlanta but across the country. Thus, they decided to turn their personal experience into a movement to combat institutionalized racism and abuse of power. The brothers' home became a hub for planning and strategy. There, surrounded by law books, articles on civil rights, and countless accounts of similar cases, they formulated a plan of action. "We're going to use everything we have, not just to win our case, but to ensure this doesn't happen to anyone else," David stated as he outlined the key points of their legal strategy. Alongside the legal action, they launched a fundraising campaign to support the cause, leveraging the wave of support that had emerged on social media. The campaign quickly gained traction, with donations pouring in from all over the country, demonstrating a broad base of support and a demand for justice and equity. Michael, despite initially hesitating to be in the spotlight, found strength in the messages of support and solidarity he received daily. "It's bigger than me, bigger than us," he reflected, feeling the responsibility and weight of his position as a central figure in this struggle. They also organized meetings with community leaders, politicians, and other activists, expanding their network of influence and collaboration. Each meeting brought new ideas and partnerships, broadening the scope and impact of their actions. The cause of Michael and David was becoming a powerful symbol of resistance and affirmative action. Determined, the brothers continued to work tirelessly, preparing for the legal battles ahead and solidifying the foundation of a movement that sought not just justice for one, but equality for all. Michael's fight was becoming, day by day, a banner for all those yearning for a more just and equitable society. With the campaign gaining momentum and community support growing, David and Michael began a meticulous investigation into local police practices. They knew that to change the system, they needed to fully understand its structure and the flaws that allowed abuses of power. The search for information led them to documents, records, and testimonies that revealed a disturbing pattern of behavior. Armed with the evidence collected, the brothers worked with civil rights experts to build a solid case. It was not just about proving the unjust treatment of Michael, but demonstrating how this behavior was rooted in police culture. Every file, every account, every number here shows more than an isolated incident. It shows a trend, David explained to a group of journalists at a press conference. At the same time, the local community became increasingly involved. Watchdog groups were formed to monitor police actions and ensure that the law was applied fairly and equitably. The sense of collective power and responsibility inspired citizens to demand greater control over the forces that were supposed to protect them. Meanwhile, Michael dedicated himself to speaking at schools, universities, and community events about his experience and the importance of citizen oversight. "We cannot sit on the sidelines waiting for others to decide our fate," he said, urging listeners to actively participate in local governance. The impact of these actions began to be felt in other cities and states, with organizations and individuals reaching out to learn from their experience. The movement, which had started with an incident in a restaurant, was now influencing policies and practices on a much larger scale. As the investigation progressed, each discovery strengthened Michael and David's case and prepared them for the next big step, confronting the system in court, not only seeking redress but demanding deep, lasting reform. The battle would be tough, but the brothers were ready, armed with the truth and supported by a community that demanded change. As the date of the trial approached, community mobilization around Michael and David intensified. They were no longer alone on this journey. The entire community seemed to have embraced the cause as their own. Support posters adorned shop windows, and planning meetings occurred almost every night in different parts of the city. In a grand show of solidarity, thousands of people from diverse backgrounds and professions gathered for a peaceful march through the streets of Atlanta. The march, filled with chants and banners calling for justice and police reform, culminated in a large rally where Michael and David were the main speakers. "Today, we march not just for me or my brother, but for all those who have felt the weight of a flawed system," Michael proclaimed from the stage, before a crowd hanging on his words. Meanwhile, David seized the media attention to press local and state authorities for legislative changes. With frequent interviews and television appearances, he explained the details of the case and highlighted the necessary changes in policing policies. His eloquence and command of the facts made him a respected figure and an influential voice in the discussion on civil rights. In addition to public demonstrations, workshops and educational forums were organized, where lawyers and activists taught citizens about their legal rights and how to protect themselves from abuses of authority. These sessions, often led by David, helped strengthen the community by equipping them with the knowledge needed to defend their rights. Support also came from outside the city. Messages and donations poured in from all over the country, while national civil rights organizations offered to assist with the case. Michael and David's local struggle was becoming a national symbol of resistance and a call to action. This broad network of support not only strengthened the case against abusive practices, but also wove a new fabric of community and mutual care. The fight for justice was transforming the face of Atlanta, uniting its residents around a common ideal of equity and mutual respect. The day of the public hearing arrived, a crucial moment in Michael and David's fight. The courtroom was packed, with every seat occupied and many spectators standing along the sides and at the back of the room. The tension was palpable, but there was also an air of expectation. Many present felt they were about to witness a significant moment in the city's history. David, with the posture of someone who understood the weight of what was at stake, presented a series of witnesses. Each shared their own experiences of abuses of power by the police. The stories were powerful and emotional, with some bringing audience members to tears and others provoking murmurs of outrage and support. Michael also took the stand, not just as a victim but as a spokesperson for a community tired of being ignored. He spoke about the night of the incident and how that event had become a turning point for him and many others. "It's not just about what happened to me in that restaurant," he explained. "It's about all the incidents that aren't filmed, about all the voices that are silenced." David's lawyers presented compelling evidence, including videos of the incident and records of other complaints against the officers involved. They argued not only for the injustice of Michael's specific case, but also for the need for systematic reform to prevent future violations. On the opposing side, the defense attorneys tried to discredit the witnesses and minimize the evidence, but the solidity of David's case made that task increasingly difficult. With each of their arguments, David or his colleagues responded with even more evidence and impactful testimonies. At the end of the day, as the judge retired to deliberate, the courtroom slowly emptied, with groups gathering outside to discuss what they had heard. Regardless of the verdict that would be rendered, it was clear that this hearing had changed something fundamental in the social fabric of the community. Michael and David's struggle had brought to light issues that many would prefer to keep in the dark, and now, with the world watching, it was impossible to ignore them. After days of intense anticipation, the judge's decision finally arrived, marking a historic moment for the city of Atlanta. The verdict was clear and condemning. The police officers involved in the incident with Dr. Michael were found guilty of misconduct and racial discrimination. Furthermore, the judge ordered a series of reforms in the local police training and supervision policies. On the day of the announcement, a crowd gathered in front of the courthouse, anxious for the outcome. When the news of the officer's conviction and the mandated reforms spread, a thunderous applause erupted among the crowd. Tears, hugs, and exclamations of joy filled the air. "Finally, justice has been served," someone shouted, and the echo of that phrase repeated throughout the crowd. Michael and David, at the center of it all, embraced each other, emotional and relieved. "This is just the beginning," Michael said, addressing journalists and supporters. "What we've achieved here today is a giant step for justice, but the journey for true equality continues." Inspired by the success of the case, other cities began to look to Atlanta as a model to follow. Messages of support and requests for consultation on similar cases started pouring in from across the country. Michael's victory was not just his own, but that of everyone fighting against injustice in their own backyards. The following days were filled with meetings among community leaders, police authorities, and politicians, all working together to implement the reforms mandated by the court. David, with his legal expertise, was often at the center of these discussions, ensuring that the promised changes became a reality. Meanwhile, the local community celebrated not only a legal victory but the strengthening of a movement. Michael and David's fight had proven that change was possible, inspiring many to continue working towards a future where justice and equality prevailed over prejudice and abuse of power. Empowered by the courtroom victory and growing community support, Dr. Michael decided to use his newfound influence for an even greater purpose. Inspired by his own journey and the desire to help others facing injustices, he founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting victims of abuse of authority and racial discrimination. The launch of the foundation was marked by a large community event that attracted hundreds of people, including activists, politicians, and ordinary citizens who wanted to be part of the change. Michael, on stage, shared his vision. This foundation is more than an organization, it is a movement. Together, we can ensure that no one else has to go through what I went through. In the following months, Michael's foundation grew rapidly, offering legal resources, emotional support, and educational opportunities for victims. Workshops and seminars became regular events, teaching people about their rights and how to protect themselves against discrimination and abuse. The foundation also worked to raise awareness about these issues, using social media and events to spread its message. Partnerships were established with lawyers, psychologists, and educators, creating a robust support network that not only fought against injustices, but also worked proactively to prevent them. Michael made it a point to be personally involved in many of these cases, bringing his experience and compassion to the work. Michael's story and his foundation began to be highlighted in national news, serving as an example of how adversity can be transformed into action. His leadership inspired many others to open similar organizations in other parts of the country, creating a network of change and support. As Michael looked back and saw all that had been achieved, he felt a mixture of gratitude and responsibility. He knew that the road ahead still had many challenges, but he was prepared to face them, strengthened by the support of his community and the certainty that he was making a difference. As Michael's foundation grew and solidified as a pillar of support and change, he began to see the real impact of his work in the community. The organization not only helped individuals in crisis situations, but also became a driving force for systemic change, promoting a broader dialogue about racial justice and police reform. At a national civil rights conference, Michael's foundation was highlighted as a model of advocacy and community action. He was invited to speak about his experience and the lessons learned in the process of transforming personal adversity into public activism. Every story we hear and every person we help reminds us why we started this, he shared with the audience, who listened intently. In addition to support and education programs, the foundation also began working in partnership with local and state police departments to review and improve training protocols. These initiatives aimed not only to correct failures, but to build bridges between the community and the police, promoting mutual understanding and respect. The visibility and success of the foundation also brought new challenges. The demand for its services was constantly increasing, and with that came the need for more resources and support. Michael dedicated himself to expanding his network of donors and partners, ensuring that the organization could continue its important work without compromising its mission. Michael's tireless efforts and his team's work began to yield visible results. Stories of individuals who had been helped by the foundation, achieving justice and rebuilding their lives, were frequently highlighted in their events and communication materials. These testimonials not only encouraged more support, but reaffirmed the value of the foundation's work. As Michael looked to the future, he remained humble and focused, knowing that every small victory was a step towards a more just society. He felt encouraged by the progress, but aware of the challenges still to come. His commitment to continue the fight was unwavering, fueled by hope and the determination that, one day, equality would prevail. The sun set over Atlanta, casting a golden glow over the city that now represented a beacon of hope and change thanks to the tireless efforts of Michael and his foundation. Sitting in his office, surrounded by stacks of documents and future plans, Michael reflected on the journey he had traveled. Since that incident in the restaurant, Michael's life had been transformed. He had become not only a symbol of the fight against injustice, but also an inspiring leader for many seeking guidance and support. It's incredible to think how difficult moments can open paths for such significant changes, he thought, looking at photos from events and people the foundation had helped. On his desk lay a pile of thank you letters from people whose lives had been touched by the foundation. Each letter was a reminder of the impact of his work and the importance of continuing. He knew that each story was a testament to what could be achieved when people united for a common cause. In a recent meeting, Michael and his team discussed new initiatives to expand the foundation's reach even further. Plans were in place for international collaborations, allowing the message of justice and equality to transcend borders. Michael was particularly excited about the possibility of taking his lessons to other parts of the world. Despite the successes, Michael remained humble, always aware that the fight for justice was ongoing. "We cannot rest on our laurels," he often told his team. "Each day brings both the chance to make a difference and the risk of backsliding." At the end of the day, Michael closed his office and walked through the streets of a city he had helped to change. He saw new and familiar faces, each with their own story, each part of the tapestry he had helped weave. The future was uncertain, but Michael's determination to continue fighting for a fairer world was as clear as the sky at dusk. As we follow Michael's journey, we see the extraordinary power of resilience and determination in the face of adversity. His story shows us that change is not only possible but achievable when we unite for a just cause. He transformed a moment of personal injustice into a movement that inspired an entire city and beyond. Now, I ask you, viewer, what actions can you take in your community to promote justice and equality? Are you ready to stand up and make a difference? Change begins with a step, a voice, an action. What will yours be? Don't miss the opportunity to be part of this community that is growing and making a difference in the world. Subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications to continue following stories like Michael's that can inspire, educate, and motivate. And don't forget to watch the recommended videos on the screen right now. Join us on this journey of transformation and be an agent of change.